Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be discussing the federal budget. We'll also be looking into a very interesting and very disturbing healthcare proposal out of Greece, and we'll be examining a proposal by a Philadelphia suburb to penalize people for not locking their cars when they're not in them. That plus a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 178 of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And Nick, we have a lot to get into. We're going to be traveling around the country, around the world, getting into all sorts of subjects, relating them back to freedom, liberty, and hopefully a smaller government. Now, we are going to be talking about the economy, some budget issues in the second half of the show, as well as some huge new internet wiretapping proposals that the Obama administration wants. Remember how it was all about giving back our civil liberties? Well, not so much.
That's more what some people thought.
Right. We'll be getting into a bill that George Bush never even dreamt about. But first, I want to talk about cutting off people's legs to save some money on diabetic socks. Is that right? I saw the title. Basically,
yeah. This is a story coming out of Greece, where the nation's largest government health insurer is proposing that it will no longer pay for special footwear for diabetes patients. Amputation is cheaper, says the benefits division of the state insurance provider. So they're literally talking about cutting off people's feet. I don't know how this would be cheaper. I guess the idea is that footwear has to be replaced a number of times.
Well,
maybe it's more expensive in Greece.
If you don't have any feet, how are you going to get around?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems
a wheelchair.
I don't see how this would save money, but it also points out how saving money, even if it involves cutting off your limbs or letting you die, is sort of one of the solutions you typically. It's not like you just have the option. I'm not sure exactly how the healthcare system works in Greece, but in many places where it's a single-payer system or the only insurance option is government-provided insurance, or the only option that people can afford at that point because they have to pay for the government-provided insurance either through taxes or through premiums. Very few people working-class people can actually afford to pay for that, and if it's available to pay for private insurance, if that even still exists. So essentially what you have is a government monopoly on insurance. And if they decide to start doing crazy things like cutting off diabetic people's feet, well, then that's very bad news for you if you're a diabetes patient. But there's not too much you can do about it. You can't just pay for a different insurance company to cover you to not have your feet cut off.
How much are special diabetic socks, Nick, or foot gear, whatever it is? I have a pair of diabetic socks, and one day I was in a small town and I had wet feet, and I needed some nice new dry socks. And after checking with every single store around, I finally found a Rite Aid, and the only socks they sold were for diabetic people. And I paid myself $8, and I got myself a nice pair of diabetic socks.
It's more expensive than regular socks.
It is.
I'm not sure what the footwear costs.
I'm not sure. It's about cutting off someone's foot to save
Seems
money.
Extreme, doesn't it?
I
don't see how it would work either.
And it really it just goes to show like how some insurance companies might run their books, because clearly now that person's going to need some other way to get around for the rest of their life. So maybe it's cheaper right there not to buy a special pair of shoes or something, but then you have to find ways to get them around for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it seems
seems like it would cost more in the long run, but I guess
this is what
you're looking at...
Well, this is the kind of thing we have to look forward to here in the U.S., because we're moving in this direction too. The new policy was announced in a letter to the Pan-Hellenic Federation of People with Diabetes. The federation disputes the science behind the decision of the benefits division. In a statement, the group argues that the decision is contrary to evidence as presented in the international scientific literature. So obviously the Federation of People with Diabetes in Greece don't want their feet to start getting cut off if they're having those kinds of problems. And they point out here, somewhat politicized, but I'll throw it in here just because I think it's interesting. Who wrote this? Greece's national healthcare system was created in the early 1980s during the tenure of Prime Minister Andreas Papandreou, I believe is how you pronounce it, an academic who won the election under the slogan, unpronounceable characters, which is the Greek word for change. Drawing a whole, they're drawing a very direct comparison.
Wait, how long
there.
ago was that?
1980s.
1980s.
We're not going to bother to check any facts in that, so take it with a grain of salt. It could be, I mean,
Greece.
very convenient for whoever wrote the article. But
well,
I believe it, though.
I don't know. I don't know what's in this healthcare bill, Nick. I think they're still working on finishing it up. We don't know
No,
what
it's
it's
passed. I
gonna
mean,
look like.
they still don't know what's in it.
Right. Well, it hasn't.
Because, of course, you have to pass a bill to know what's in it, apparently.
Right. Well,
if you believe the Speaker of the House.
Well,
that's a scary thing for the Speaker of the U.S. House to say. That's how they legislate now.
Well, that's
Just
how
blindly.
things go. That's the new
I wouldn't
US.
sign a cell phone contract without reading it and just assume that I know what's in it.
You're very diligent.
But well, not really. I mean, I might sign it, but I'm not going to say that that's a good practice. Yet, you have the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the U.S. Congress saying that it's ethical and it's due diligence to actually just vote on a multiple thousands pages piece of legislation that's going to have billions of dollars worth of economic impact without reading it.
I think the line of
without
thinking
reading it.
Well, the line of thinking is that it's easier to see how it plays out and is interpreted by thousands and thousands of lawyers and policy implementers. It's easier to do that than actually read it.
The language isn't even straightforward enough.
Oh, of course it's not.
Right.
This is how bills work. I mean, it's kind of evil in a sense. You have lawyers write the laws and they purposely make them so broad and confusing that you have to hire another team of lawyers to interpret those laws, and then you have to use the court systems and everything to
there's a
hire
good
more
reason for that. A lot
lawyers
of
for
the
that.
legislators, at least in Washington, D.C., a lot of them are lawyers, whether that was their main profession or not. So they write things just like a legal contract. They write it in as obscure a way as possible so that people can't really tell what's in it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, I guess, in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years, I guess, how our healthcare system
There's a possibility
turns out.
that it will be repealed. I mean, we'll have to see what happens with the election. It's unlikely, but I could see the Republican. They probably won't repeal that much of it. They might repeal a couple provisions or
they'd run on this ballot of
the
pulling parts out and stuff, but they're all for bigger government, Nick. That's how they work.
Right. I mean, plus I think there's going to be a lot of money to be made here by
Plenty of money,
by insurers, and
plenty
they're
of
gonna
backs to be scratched.
The health insurance companies are not going to be hurt by this. No. Most of them. I mean, maybe some of them
little guys.
Maybe some of them won't be able to adjust their business model, but most of these big companies they're going to just find a way to make more money as a result of this. It's really the average person who has to pay for health insurance or employers who are going to be hurt by this. I don't think the insurance companies are really going to be hurt in the long run at all. If anything, I think it'll help.
No, they'll have more people to be insured. All right, Nick, moving right along to something a little bit less serious than cutting off people's feet to save a few bucks. But still, it's kind of disturbing. I mean, it just goes to show what government's purpose has come to in certain parts of America, and this is spreading everywhere. This is coming from Philadelphia, where lawmakers are considering fining people who don't lock their car doors. A suburban Philadelphia township is considering whether to fine people who don't lock their car doors. Commissioners in the Upper Moreland Township are debating an ordinance that would require people to lock their car doors when parked in public areas or face citation and a fine of $25. Police Chief Thomas Nessel says that since 2008, 3/4 or more of each year's reported thefts in the township are from cars left unlocked. Well, yeah, but it's a natural consequence. If you don't lock your car door, you get your stuff robbed or your car robbed. Do you need the police robbing $25 from you on top of that? The Buck County Courier-Times reports that under the proposal, police would do spot checks on cars in the neighborhoods having problems with theft from cars. So they just go around in the neighborhood and check car doors, and if you left yours unlocked, they'd lock it for you and then give you a warning for the first offense and a $25 citation for subsequent offenses.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is I'm not sure specifically how the laws work. Typically, if you leave the door to your house unlocked, it probably varies by jurisdiction, but typically in most places, if you leave the door to your house unlocked, the police still need a warrant. They can't just walk into your home and start wandering around.
Open your door? No. If it's left ajar, that's a different story, I think.
Right, or if there's evidence of a crime,
Right.
If they have probable cause to go in.
But if it's just shut, you can't open the door and
But
go in.
outbuildings are a different story. At least as far as I understand it here in New Hampshire, if you have a barn, if you have a shed, if it's not locked up, the assumption is that there's not a right to privacy for something like a shed, something that's not a domicile, not a residence. I would imagine the same could apply for cars. So if police are opening the car door to, well, fine you, and kind of look around, they can look in the window anyway. I mean, if it's in plain view, they're going to be able to do that. But it is going to give them a little bit more of a pretense to just go into your car.
And lock the doors and then give you a fine for it. Nick,
Right.
I used to have a car.
And look for other contraband or anything.
I'm not a man who likes to buy expensive cars and spend a lot of money on expensive cars. I went through that stage in high school, and I got over it. A car is something that gets me from point A to point B, from work to home to work to school to work to home, etc. So I drive around little beaters. I don't want to waste my money on cars. It's not an investment. I've had a few different cars who you could lock the doors, but you couldn't unlock them afterwards. And so this would very upset me. This would upset me greatly to find that my car door had been unlocked, and I'd have to go hire a locksmith to use their little tool to unlock it with. So it seems like it just seems so wrong on so many issues. I mean, not only are you violating someone's personal space by going in their car and locking it, the person, natural consequence would say, well, if you leave your car unlocked, there's a chance that it's going to get stolen or rifled through. And number 4, what is the job of the government, Nick? What if people come to where it is the job of the government to train you to lock your doors in good diligence?
We've done that story. I think we did this story out of Ohio where they were doing this with house doors.
Yes. Well, they'd go out, and windows. They'd check if a window is locked. They'd open the window,
right,
and then they'd go bang on your door. And this is at like 2 in the morning.
Right. Some people don't want to lock their door, whether you think it's a good idea or not. Some people don't want to lock their doors.
In the land of the free, the home of the brave, Nick, you're allowed to make stupid decisions. That's what freedom is. It's giving you and me responsibility. If we're free people, that comes with a lot of responsibility.
And you bear the responsibility. I mean, if your car is broken into and your radio is ripped out of it.
If we're not free people, we have no responsibility. That's being put in a prison cell. What's the responsibility? To sit there.
Yeah,
and as you get less and less freedom, you have less and less responsibility.
Right. Well, that's because they criminalize what are essentially stupid decisions, or just in their judgment, whoever the legislature is or whoever the people are coming up with these ordinances, in their opinion, that they'll take everything they consider kind of a stupid idea that's not really criminal, and then they'll criminalize it, or they'll attach a fine to it. And so essentially what they do is they criminalize what they see as poor decision making. They take, as you pointed out, the responsibility to make decisions away, and they take the freedom to make that choice away. I mean, they're both connected. And
I mean,
if you're free to make decisions, you also have a responsibility to protect your own property.
It's a good idea to lock your car door, Nick. Locks keep honest people honest. They also can help to keep criminals out of your car.
Locks only work on honest people for the most part. It's not hard to. If somebody wants to break into your house,
they're going to break your window or something, or they're going to.
A lock doesn't do. It's not that hard to break into your house.
That's all locks really do. Or I guess if they're going down a line of cars, they just find the first unlocked one if it was a criminal. But for the most part, it is a good idea still to lock your door. But outlawing it, you can't outlaw stupidity. You just
apparently
can't do it. Well, you can.
It doesn't work very well.
Well, it just creates. I guess it's a revenue thing. Maybe, I don't know. It's depressing, though.
Well, it also creates a society where people are looking to the government to tell them what is stupid and what is not. You can probably exercise your own judgment if you're an adult out there watching. Common sense is pretty much common sense. If you don't want to use it, if the things that make it common sense, like locking doors, things like that, if the natural deterrents to it, like maybe your car is going to get gone through by a thief, if that's not enough of a deterrent on its own, then a $25 fine really isn't going to change your behavior. I think largely what this is revenue collection.
Yeah,
Just
and I think it's also
free to make these kinds of decisions for themselves.
I think it's also people thinking that they can write words on a piece of paper and it's actually going to really change people's behaviors. And it just doesn't work time and time again. What you're just going to create more criminals, essentially. When you outlaw more things, you're just creating more criminals. When you're making more rules, you're going to have more rule breakers. It's natural. That's just how it works. Yeah. Anyways, Nick, we do need to move on. When we come back, we are going to be getting into some really scary big government stuff from right here in the United States. Gloom and doom coming right up. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. Welcome back to Free Minds TV. It still is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website. It's about that time in the show, right, Nick? What's the website? freemindstv.com is how you can get there, or freemindsmedia.org, I think, is the graphic.
Both of those would work.
Both of those would work. You can also get there by Free Minds Radio, because we do, .com, because we do a radio show, so you can check out those archives on the site. You can contact us. You can donate us some money if you'd like. We're running in red right now. It would be nice to get back into the black. But if you're poor, we understand. You can always enjoy the content for free. It's all up there, up at freemindstv.com. All right, Nick. We're going to get into some really big government stuff. This is the stuff that, well, it's kind of depressing because so little you can do about it, but it's still important to talk about so that you know what's happening out there. We're going to be getting into the budgetary stuff and some numbers and how much debt we're in, which is, I know we talk about it a lot, but it's important to talk about because the debt's still growing. But first, I want to talk about the Obama administration and wiretapping. The U.S. Government, the federal government, and the Obama administration want broader internet wiretap authority. Now, when Obama ran for president, he ran under the ticket of saying that he was going to restore civil liberties, and he hasn't really done that. In fact, he's trying to expand it way more than George Bush ever did. The Obama administration is developing plans that would require all internet-based communication services, such as encrypted BlackBerries, Facebook, and Skype, among hundreds of others, to be capable of complying with federal wiretap orders, according to the report published on Monday. The national security officials and federal government enforcement argue that their ability to eavesdrop on terror suspects is increasingly going dark. Quote, "We're not talking about expanding authority," FBI General Counsel Vali Kapil told The Times. "We're talking about preventing and preserving the safety of America." Oh, I'm sorry, preventing terrorist attacks and preserving the safety of the country. All right, so here's what we're talking about. Let's break this down a little bit. Currently, the encrypted emails, Skype conversations, and all sorts of information on the internet cannot be received by anyone unless they've got a great deal of hacking skills. What the federal government is asking for is an entire rewrite of all these programs and putting in backdoor password codes into all of them so that anytime they want to, they can easily just go listen in or collect your emails or whatever else you're doing over the internet without a warrant or anything like that. Not only is this a grave violation of the Constitution, but it's also asking all the companies who provide these services to completely overhaul how they work. Because currently, a lot of these systems don't have ways to hack into them to listen to the encrypted conversation. It's encrypted. That's the definition. So you're asking these encrypted email services and Skype and all these different ways that people communicate on the internet to lose their security, all in the sake of providing you with security.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what encryption amounts to in the digital age is essentially a sealed document or a locked door. I mean, that's what it's doing. It's some kind of a communication or a transaction that people have they've put up barriers to entry so to make the information more secure. I mean, most credit card transactions, one would hope, if you're going through reputable websites, most of them have some kind of an encryption process there so that it's not easy to intercept all your credit card information when you're making a payment online. And the same goes for emails, or as you pointed out, Toby, VoIP communications through things like Skype. And it's pretty much impossible for them to change the encryption, at least in a hurry, so that the government will have a backdoor into every encrypted file that's out there. Not to mention that people in other countries or in the US who are operating outside the bounds of the law, if they're actually interested in passing around encrypted information that the government can't get into, people with computer skills could write their own code. I mean, they could make their own encryption. And that's, or people in Pakistan or people in India. Not like there's anybody in those countries who has computer skills, right?
Oh, I know.
I think
tell me this.
I think that's actually where most of these programmers who program the U.S. stuff
How many
are.
how many real terrorists out there are sending their messages over Facebook email?
This is not going to, right, and this is not going.
This is to spy on you and me and everybody else. That's what this is for, to find out what every single American is doing at all times.
And we know that the wiretapping that took place during the Bush administration, we know it was a far wider net than they said initially.
Yep.
I forget how many they've admitted to so far, but isn't it in the hundreds of thousands
very
at this
high.
point? I mean, so there is a very good chance that you're not just paranoid, that they are watching.
Well,
you
especially as technology it's increasing.
Right. Well, they don't even have to
rapidly.
actively watch you, but it is possible for the government to gather a whole bunch of
Yes.
information on you.
They can have a program that
computer
just
program.
gathers and gathers and gathers and gathers and gathers, and if they ever want a profile on you, well, there it is. If they ever want any information, it's creepy. It's that Big Brother 1984 stuff. Any communication you do, essentially, the government will know about, and it's all to protect you. Not only that, though, this also makes all of your information much less secure, not only because the government's watching it, but now you've created back doors that other hackers can get into.
Well, and
other people can know everything
and
that you're
people
doing
in that
as well.
industry are going to have to know about it. If Skype has to put in a backdoor so that you can listen in on Skype conversations, you can bet that there are going to be dozens, if not hundreds of people who work for Skype on the private side who are going to know about the backdoors. And all it takes is one of those people to go into the black market with that knowledge.
We've reported so many cases where the government loses the laptop.
Well, not to mention the government workers.
Right, okay, let's say you trust them.
my briefcase.
We're just pretending the governments are perfect people and we trust them. How many times have we reported on them losing a laptop and then suddenly millions of social security numbers are out there in the hands of criminals and thieves? So, man, this is just, go Obama administration. Did you vote for him because you thought he would restore civil liberties? Well, if you're Democrat, you should have probably voted for Dennis Kucinich or Ron Paul, because those are the only people who would have done that.
Yeah, and they're also talking about, I don't think it's gone anywhere yet, but the internet kill switch legislation, basically the idea that the president would have the power to shut down the internet. I think it's for either 60 or 90 days. Basically shut down the internet entirely, shut down certain sites, shut down internet service to a certain part of the country. I mean,
these individual.
Right. I mean, these are by definition totalitarian powers. Not that they will necessarily be used in sort of a Hitlerian way, but these are the powers that you give to a dictator.
Well, they'd be used.
And that was a concern during the Bush administration. Do Democrats? No, Democrats aren't subject to human nature too. A Democratic president can't violate people's rights or blacklist political enemies, because I'm pretty sure that if you look back through history, both parties have just about as bad a track record of safeguarding American civil liberties. It doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or if they're a Republican.
They both eat away at them until there's only tatters of the Constitution left. Not to mention, Obama inherited all of Bush's powers. So how do you Republicans feel now about all those new presidential powers that George Bush got to him? Now that Obama's in charge of them, now it's a little bit scary. How about next? All the Democrats are like, oh, but we have Democrats inside. Obama wouldn't do that to us.
So we'll hand him more power.
Time, next election cycle, we're going to have a Republican, and then he's got all of Obama's powers and George Bush's powers and Clinton's power.
The powers really never diminish.
Stack up. Right.
You
It's
never
just
see
a
executive
bigger
power
and bigger pile.
declining.
Speaking of bigger and bigger piles, Nick, bigger and bigger pile is this giant budget deficit, because programs like this cost a lot of money. To monitor everything that all the Americans are doing, it takes a big government, which takes a lot of money.
Yeah, more money than the government has at the moment. Pointing out that the Congressional Budget Office has released the preliminary budget figures for fiscal year 2010. And it's not good if you're somebody who believes in, even if you don't believe in smaller government, if you just believe in, I don't know, sane fiscal policy, it's not good. And people are saying we're not spending enough, by the way. There are a lot of people out there who are arguing for more government intervention to jumpstart the economy under the Keynesian model. And they're saying we need to be spending a lot more money. How much did they spend for budget year 2010 or fiscal year 2010? Spending rolled on for the year that ended September 30th at $3.45 trillion. That's $3,045 billion. According to the preliminary figures. Could be revised up as well as down. Second only to 2009's $3.52 trillion in the record books. But I don't think this means Washington was relatively less spendthrift. CBO reports that the modest overall spending decline results from three three one-time events, and they point out some of these. The cost of TARP declined by $262 billion from 2009, as some banks have paid the bailout cash. And there are some other factors that are related to basically to the economic relief efforts that reduce that. So, yeah.
So we still have a big government, Nick.
We still have an enormous government, and I mean, it's grown by leaps and bounds. Social Security spending increased since 2008, increased almost 15%.
Well, we know this is going to be happening every single year as more and more baby boomers
Medicare,
start collecting.
over 15%. Well, Medicaid unemployment benefits, Medicaid increased over 35%. Unemployment benefits since 2008 have increased 240%. That makes sense because so many people are out of work. Defense up 12, and all spending in general at the federal level since 2008 has grown by 21%. The federal budget is it's grown by nearly a quarter. I mean, it's nearly 25% in 2 years.
You know, Nick, I want them to be able to change the term defense, Department of Defense or whatever.
Well, it used to be the War Department.
Right, it should be like the attacking other countries department, well, the intervention department.
War, because I mean they tried to
We're
address
defending our country by killing people in the desert and across the world.
Well, and not even that. I mean, a lot of that money is being spent on in non-combat operations. We still have troops in Germany. That war's been over for a while. Japan, Korea. Pretty much.
Okay.
You
Can we just call it the occupation department then?
Well, it's not really occupying. Yeah, some countries are occupied.
You have boots on the ground, Nick. I consider that occupying.
Not really.
Country.
I mean, yeah, but they're in a fence. It's just the worldwide presence. It's the posturing
they'd be
budget.
occupying New Hampshire and Keene and the United States.
Yeah, I mean,
why is it not? It would be occupying if any other country did it to us, but yet we do it to other countries and it's not occupying.
Occupying tends to imply that the foreign army's actually taking control. I mean, if the Mexicans
ready.
If the Mexicans paid to have a base and leased it from the U.S. government,
so that's the difference. If
people wouldn't like it. Americans would never tolerate this. On the flip side. It's a good point. I don't know if I call it occupation, though.
It's small. Can we call it small occupation?
Downsized. But it's not like they've taken the land. They're actually paying for it. Like they're renting it. They're just chilling there. Like in Okinawa, they're just chilling there. They've been there for 50 years, but they're not really doing anything.
Okay.
In terms of occupying.
Well, I guess the big old. I liked what I said yesterday. I said like a big tick of government just growing and growing. Eventually, I think, do ticks ever pop?
I don't know. They get easier to squish.
All right. Well, I guess we're getting easier to squish because the more money we spend, I mean, that's the defense we should be working on, is getting our budget under control.
It's probably the budget threat is the biggest threat.
That is a way that other countries can easily squish us when we've got trillions of dollars piling on trillions of dollars year after year, not doing anything.
Well, we could crush ourselves even if the Chinese or anybody else doesn't decide to try to destroy the U.S. economically. It's going to collapse under its own weight, and it's a much bigger threat than terrorists or foreign governments even to Americans' liberty and to their
But I do want to remind our viewers, Nick, not to let the politics in Washington control your happiness level, because then we'd all be very depressed and there would be no happiness left. So
I would have hung myself.
Right. So, I mean, it's important to know about, but don't let it control your life.
There's some things you just can't control.
You can just holy crap, that's a big problem. Now let's move on to something fun. That's what I'm going to go do. We're out of time this week. It's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Join us at freemindstv.com in the meantime. See you next week.